Literally. In a land of likes, leggings, and lattes comes a podcast hosted by two basic beings, Becca and Maddie. This is the Basic Bee Podcast.
Hello. That was quite the entrance for people watching on YouTube of Maddie spanking the air.
Yeah, I don't know what just possessed me.
We are a little slap happy. We are recording this at almost 10 o'clock at night.
I work at like 6 a.m.
Yeah, just to get the content out there for you bees.
Yes, and our hats look very funny.
Yeah, with the headphones. They look better in the pictures, so those will be to come.
I may have to take this hat off at some point. We are dressed up as witches.
Yeah, we'll probably have to take the hat off soon, but it's fine.
It's fine. Nobody can appreciate my earrings that have a crystal ball held by a talon.
They're very Maleficent.
Right.
Style, yeah.
So anyway, how have you been?
I've been good. It's been busy between... Maddie just spilled her drink all over her.
It's fine.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. I've been busy between school and work, though. How have you been?
I've been good. We just celebrated Becca's birthday 3 months late.
It was so much fun, though.
I really had a good time. We went to the Cake Bake Shop, which is a magical cake shop, very overpriced, but the theme there is enchanted woodland forest.
Yeah, because there were like fairies and unicorns and
mushrooms,
all the shrooms.
Yeah, we had truffle fries.
I was gonna say that truffle fries are probably one of my new obsessions. They were very delicious. They were truffle. They were what they say. They were fried in truffle oil or something, and then they topped them with Parmesan seasoning, and it was delicious.
Yeah, I was a big fan. I got the peanut butter chocolate crunch cake. What did you get?
I got the cookie dough cake.
And they put a little candle in it.
Yeah, for my birthday.
Did you make a wish?
Yes.
Tell me.
I can't. It won't come true.
Oh, well, you're a witch. So.
I made a very, very weird wish.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it kinky?
No, it's not kinky.
All right. Well, I guess... Is that your obsession for the week?
That was one of them. I have two. So why don't you go next since I named that as my first one?
All right. So a couple days ago, Adam and I were at Kroger and we found the Pillsbury cookie dough, but it's pumpkin.
Ooh.
They have white chocolate chips in them, which I normally don't like, but these are so good. So it's just like regular cookie dough, except it's pumpkin. It's in a little orange package. They seem to be selling out pretty fast, but I would say that's my current obsession.
That's a good one for sure. My other obsession is the nose strips to get rid of your pores. It's like they're the charcoal nose strips. I've been putting them on. It's actually really my obsession as I'm getting older is becoming skincare. And so I love those strips. And then I have these lips that you put on, like their lip moisturizers or something.
Mask?
Yeah, a lip mask. Then I have the under eye mask, and then I have all the mask with the rolly ball thing, and it's been very, very nice taking care of my face, skin, and it feels amazing.
You could be an esthetician.
I don't want to give people advice on their skin.
You have really nice skin.
Well, thank you. I don't want to be, I don't know. I feel like skin's so different. It is difficult to diagnose. So,
yeah.
So, do you have a second obsession?
No, just cookies.
Just the pumpkin cookies?
And I had a really good cider slush yesterday.
Ooh, where'd you get that from?
It's called Adrian's Orchard. It's on the south side of Indy. It's really good. And we went to a different orchard like last week and they didn't have any cider. Their cider mill was down. But I officially had my first cider slush yesterday at Adrian's Orchard in 90 degrees. It was really good.
Well, there you go. Well, that's what's good about it being a slush.
Yeah.
Is you could drink it when it's cold.
I don't like hot
when
cider.
It's hot out. You don't like hot cider?
No.
Not even when it's like really cold out?
No.
Really?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I mean, we all have our preferences.
Yeah. To each his own.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. So the reason we are dressed up as witches is obviously in honor of spooky season.
Yes, we have so many exciting costumes
Yes.
planned out. I still have one that's undecided.
And we can't give any hints.
Nope.
But you're going to love it. And you better be paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it will make you laugh. It will make you cry.
It'll touch you.
It will make you die inside.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that kind of rhymed.
I think that was a Halloween poem.
It was beautiful. And then we're gonna do maybe some pictures in my house and outside of my house.
Yes.
These costumes.
This is the first time I've been in Becca's house since she's decorated for the season. It's a lot. I don't really know how you found the storage for all of the decor.
An attic.
It's amazing. We're gonna post some pictures of it later.
Mm-hmm.
But so to kick off spooky season, this week's episode is all about witches.
What's up, witches?
We are the basic witches.
Mm-hmm. And we're gonna be talking about some real witches in the house.
Maybe
the baddest of all bees.
Yes, or the waddest of the wheeze.
That too.
That didn't work out how I wanted.
No, but it was good.
Thank you. Well, anything else to start us off with?
No, let's get into it.
Okay, I'm so sorry if I kind of stumbled through this, but I took a lot of notes about Salem. This episode is mostly going to be focused on Salem and the witch trials that went on there in the 1600s. I'm going to do my best, but, there have been some different historical takes on this event in history. So the details are different depending on where you read them.
Yeah, definitely.
So just imagine 1600s.
That's what I was going to say too. It takes place in the 1600s. So
right.
The facts are not great, but
yeah. And I have some information about like the record keeping that was done. So, it's the very early days of America as we know it. It's taken over by the Puritans. And the reason they are called the Puritans is important to the witch trials. So the Puritans' goal when they came over from Europe was to purify their beliefs, basically, and to be a city on the hill. They wanted to be a shining example to the rest of the world of what a thriving utopian society would look like. So they really wanted to be blameless in God's sight. They took the Bible very literally. It was a very strict culture. And it was so strict that they had a man carry a stick around the church in case anyone was falling asleep or children were, messing around, not paying attention. I mean, this was a no-play society.
Wow. Could you imagine getting hit with a stick if you're like daydreaming during church? I'd get hit a lot because sometimes I'm just like thinking about something else.
Sorry, I was drinking Dr. Pepper.
You're fine. Got to stay awake somehow.
Yeah, we're staying up till the full moon tonight. So part of their beliefs were that women were more susceptible to sin because they believed in the story of Adam and Eve that Eve was morally inferior to Adam, and that's why she ate of the fruit. So they thought that women were weaker in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Which leads to the witches that we're going to talk about. So witch trials were actually very common in Europe. The Salem witch trials were one of the last recorded trials of this sort in history. Wow. And oftentimes I think people, like I probably thought it was one of the earliest, but it had been going on for centuries. And the witch trials in Europe, from what we have gathered, there were over 50,000 people sentenced just between the 16th and the 17th centuries alone as witches.
Wow.
So
That's insane.
Yeah, it's nothing near what went on in Salem.
Mhm.
But something that I found interesting was there were some witch trials, I think a few decades before Salem, and they were in Connecticut in America. And when this had happened again during Salem, the Puritans were very shocked. They kind of thought that they had moved on from that because they had left Europe, and it was kind of, I don't know if it was getting outdated, but it was kind of a surprising thing that had happened.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know about the one in Connecticut at all.
Yeah, I kind of listened to some stories about that. It was very interesting, but I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, something to note was I'm going to be talking about two different sections of Salem. So there was a Salem village and there was a Salem town. The village was a bit northwest of the main town. It wasn't as thriving. It was more of a farm town. And I had heard that if you do go to Salem, I have been, you really need to go to what is now called Danvers, because they did a much better job of keeping historical artifacts and I think landscaping than actual Salem has. And what's funny is I went to Salem a few years ago. We were only there for a day, and it was really cool. I think it was in the fall time, actually.
Wow.
But I was really surprised because the museum that we visited, which was all about the witch trials, it felt like it was from the freaking 80s.
Really?
They hadn't updated it. There was no modern technology in it.
Oh, no.
It felt like a step back in time. And I was like, man.
But not in a good way.
Yeah, these people get, millions of dollars, probably billions in tourism a year because people come to Salem during the fall time, and they can't invest in their witch museum. But that was just my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was other cool stuff, but I didn't have time to see it. Okay, so back to our story. Something to note about this time was New Englanders liked taking each other to court. The reason was the Puritans tried to steer away from physical violence that they had been used to. So they got in the practice of suing each other. So it was a big time of discord and fighting over land and fighting over power. So that kind of something that led, we think, to the witch trials.
Wow.
So, let's see. During the witch trials, over 100 people were imprisoned in Salem. This all started around August and September of 1692. So it was almost 1700. Something else that I found out was there was, I think it was one of the coldest winters in 1691. And then it was one of the worst droughts in 1693. So that'll come into play later.
Okay.
So when these trials were going on, which I'll talk more about, people from all over different towns were coming to them to see them because it was kind of like drama. So
Something to do.
Yeah.
In the 1600s, there wasn't much. So, yeah.
I think we would.
I would have gone, yeah.
Because it was very entertaining. It was kind of freakish. I mean, if you had nothing to look forward to in life, you were working hard every day, and you heard there was a witch or a hanging, you'd probably attend.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, I was watching the Ted Bundy documentary, and the amount of people that were watching and standing outside the courthouse for his trial and the amount of people outside for when he was put to death.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the same thing because he was just like weird. You
Well,
know?
he was guilty.
Well, that is the difference. He was guilty, but you know, like it's just that weird fascination we have with something being abnormal. We have to see how what's going on and everything else.
Right. Okay. Well, that is kind of a good comparison because, you know, it's like Rome. We just want to see disaster.
Yeah.
It's like a human instinct. Okay. So this basically all started when the ordained minister's daughter and niece, out of nowhere, supposedly started having fits that seemed kind of like possession. They would randomly claim to go blind or mute. They would thrash all around, contort their bodies. They would make really creepy sounds. They would act like animals sometimes. They would basically just act like what you'd think a possessed person would act like. Let's see. And then, I'm going to have to give the details in a minute.
Okay.
So, something that I wanted to mention was the government might have emptied evidence of the witch trials that would have been valuable. I was watching a documentary about this a couple nights ago, and something that a historian had mentioned was after the witch trials, kind of everything went quiet. There are theories it was a large-scale government cover-up. It was really hard to find where the hangings actually happened, which I thought was interesting. There were bans put on publications about the trials, and there were books burned to cover up that innocent lives were lost afterward.
Wow.
So it kind of leads into the Illuminati, if you really think about it. But
the governor of Salem was in the Illuminati.
Well,
or the mayor.
There is a very interesting story about the governor. So during these trials, he was kind of uninvolved, I think. And then his wife got accused of being a witch. And he immediately got involved and made the courts more lenient. And I believe some of the accused were freed from jail.
Wow.
So that's kind of messed up because he didn't care till his wife was involved.
Yeah, for real.
So something to note was not all of the witches who were hanged, I think hanged is the correct word, were women. Some of them were men. I think it was like 4 or 5.
Yeah, I was going to say there wasn't very many men at all, but there were men.
Yeah, and one of them, his name was John Proctor. And basically, I think what I learned about him was he was an unordained minister of the village, not the town. So the ordained minister of the town of Salem, his name was Paris. His last name was Paris. And his daughter and niece are the first 2 to get possessed by what they claim were witches. So John Proctor was kind of his, not enemy, but he would...
rival.
Right. He was a rival in a little town who wanted their own church, but he wasn't technically ordained. And so the girls accused him, I think. Sorry if the details are messed up.
You're fine.
I was learning a lot. So he claimed he was innocent, and when he was about to get hung, he said the Lord's Prayer perfectly. And a legend was that a true witch couldn't do that. And they still hung him.
That's awful.
Yeah, and he claimed his innocence, and it didn't matter. So, yeah, not all of the witches accused were women. Basically, okay, so more into the details. So there was a new church, like I said, in the village. The pastor's salary was being fought over. So he kind of started putting this in his messages to his congregation, trying to scare them and trying to get his money.
That's so crazy.
Let's see. So then I think that was Paris. So his daughter was 9, his niece was 11. Then they became afflicted with fits. They were bitten and pinched by invisible agents, supposedly.
Interesting.
So then a doctor came to diagnose them, and he didn't know what it was. So the doctor diagnosed them with witchcraft. So that's kind of interesting because that was a medical diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, in what movie was it? I watched a movie about, I forgot the name of it, but it made it to where the girls were faking being possessed. But I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yeah, that is definitely a theory.
That they were just like wanting attention and.
Yeah, I mean, you're bored. You have no Hannah Montana.
I know. Well, and I mean, going mute and blind, that's a little odd, but maybe they had seen there was somebody in the town that was a mute or blind and they were just playing pretend, and the parents didn't want to believe that they were playing pretend because maybe if they're a Puritan society, a lot of old beliefs hold that if you were blind or mute that you had some sort of sin in your life that was really bad, and so maybe they didn't believe the kids could have it or that they were pretending. So
yeah, there are some very interesting theories about that. So the diagnosis of witchcraft is basically witchcraft is a crime punishable by death. So it was very serious. So their neighbor suggests a folklore method to finding the witch that was hexing these girls. So this folklore basically says that you made a cake with the urine of the afflicted person's urethra.
Ew.
I don't know why I said it like that. But you collect their piss, you put it in a cake, and then you feed the cake to a dog. So then, this is where I heard a few different things. I've heard that the dog will lead them to the witch. I've heard that if the dog eats the cake and acts afflicted himself, that, I don't know, they were afflicted by a witch. It's kind of confusing. There's weird details that got mixed up when I was...
How terrible, a dog acting weird after eating piss. Piss cake.
They do eat their own shit. So.
That is true. It's disgusting. Anyway.
So, we're going to get into a possibility. One theory of what actually caused these fits. One very popular theory is something that is called ergot. So ergot is a fungus that causes hallucinogenic effects. It's similar to LSD. I believe it's found in LSD.
Wow.
And it comes from contaminated rye.
Little girls were getting high.
Yes, unknowingly. Supposedly. I don't know. But there are a few holes in this theory.
Okay.
Because why was it only affecting women? And the way that families ate back then, they all shared food. So why was it affecting this very specific group of people and not the rest of a family who ate the same grain?
Yeah.
So that is a theory, but it's probably unlikely.
A little shoddy.
But the reason that is an interesting theory is because, remember the very cold winter I referenced in 1961? That would have caused the perfect conditions for contaminated rye because it would have been very moist. So, and also, these trials basically ended in 1962, never to happen again, which kind of makes sense because there was a very hot summer and drought in 1963. So it would have killed off the ergot.
Gotcha.
I think I'm saying that right. So then, the two little girls who started it basically blame Tituba. Have you heard of her at all?
No. Wait, yes, I have. Yeah, she was the first one hung, right?
So no.
She
actually survived.
Really?
She was, I think, Paris's, see, I got this a little screwed up. I can't remember if it's Paris's or the other minister's slave. I think it was Paris's. So we don't know her ethnicity. It's most likely that she was Native American, and there were very bad wars going on between the Native Americans and the Puritans at the time. So she would have been a little bit darker skinned, kind of an outsider. So it kind of makes sense that they would have blamed Tituba.
Yeah.
So, let's see.
So did the dog lead them to Tituba, or did they? That was probably not going to be recorded anyway.
The girls verbally accused her. So let's see. So then there was an 18-year-old named Mercy Lewis who started acting possessed. And there were 3 other girls who started acting possessed as well. And they all blamed Tituba. Since they were older, they could use their testimony in court because they couldn't use the 9 and 11-year-olds' testimony in court.
Wow.
So it's kind of convenient that older girls accused her as well. So the courtroom is full. They brought in what was called magistrates to interview her, looking for a confession. The transcripts say that Tituba claimed that she was innocent, but we don't know if they started physically beating her or she was scared of getting beaten. So out of fear, she basically says that a man told her to serve the devil, or a man was the devil and told her to serve him. So she basically said she was innocent and then says she was guilty.
Yeah.
She said that sometimes this man appeared as a hog or a black dog. And as soon as she said that in the court, the girls became afflicted by her words. So they started acting crazy in the courtroom. I don't know why they were there. But then she offered the names of other witches who were, cursing these girls. Basically to get, I think, pass the blame on to someone else.
Yeah.
So Tituba was taken to jail. She was put in jail with a beggar and a woman with loose morals, was how she was described. And then that sent, so the women she named, I think there were 7.
Wow.
So that sent them on a witch hunt for these 7 women because Tituba named them.
I would have come up with some really weird fake names that they would never find. And be like, the witches are evading you.
I think the communities were so small back then that they would know everyone.
I would say they lived in the woods. I don't know, but she was probably scared.
Well, so what they were looking for from these accused women was basically claiming your innocence. And once they were able to say that you were lying, that you were innocent, they would hang you. So it didn't make sense.
No.
And
did it with no proof.
Because with Tituba, she basically said she was guilty and she survived. But all the women who went to their grave saying they were innocent were hanged. So it didn't really make sense. And they weren't, obviously there weren't lawyers back then. The women were left to defend themselves. So it was really messed up. So in this jail that Tituba was in, there was a woman named Sarah Good. She was a poor woman who was jailed with her 4-year-old daughter. When they were in jail, one of the things they looked for on these accused women was called a witch's teat.
Oh my gosh.
Have you heard of this?
No.
So they made the women take their clothes off and look for a marking on their body. And what this marking was, they thought, was that the devil's animals, like mice and birds, would suck from this teat
Ew.
on the witch. And this could be anything from like a birthmark to a scar. Like, it didn't matter. They just were looking for an excuse. So I thought that was really freaking weird.
I'm just wondering what they thought birthmarks were.
They thought it was a nipple for a rat.
Yeah, but to think like people have had birthmarks for years. Like, and most of these people looking for birthmarks, what if they had one themselves? Like,
I mean, Harry Styles would be screwed.
does he have a birthmark?
He has 4 nipples.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, he would be screwed. He has 2 teats for the mice
And the cats.
Yeah.
So, another interesting thing, while they were in jail, they got charged for room and board.
They got charged to be there.
Yeah, even though they couldn't leave.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that messed up? So, also, when they're in jail, the sheriff went and took their property, which
Oh my
forced
gosh.
them into further poverty.
So not only do you have to pay for being somewhere you're forced to be, you get everything else taken away from you. Wow.
Yeah, it's really sad. And they were very malnourished. They were isolated in jail. It was very horrible. I think one woman had a baby and it died because.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like I said, the accused witches, supposed witches, couldn't have an attorney, so they had to defend themselves. So by this point, the girls who were accusing started going crazy. They started imitating each other. It was kind of going around town, happening a lot. Like I said, over 100 to 200 people were accused by the end of it. It was talked about in this documentary as a psychiatric condition, often a term spoken when talking about the witch trials is mass hysteria, which we'll talk about. Hypochondria, thinking you have what everyone else is saying they have. So I'm sure that played a part. So Bridget Bishop was the first witch to hang. She was around 50, and I think she was considered another woman with loose morals. She wasn't a perfect Puritan in their eyes. And when she was hung, one of the judges resigned in protest because he was disgusted by the hanging.
Oh my gosh.
But it didn't do any good, obviously.
You wonder if he could have done any good staying.
They probably would have accused him of being a witch.
That's true.
So 5 more were hanged because they wouldn't confess. Those who confessed are never convicted. So then there was a guy named George Burroughs. He was accused by 8 different people. Something that was interesting about him was he had darker skin and he escaped a lot of the Indian raids unscathed. So there are theories maybe he had some Native American blood in him. Another, like Tituba, she was kind of an outsider because she didn't look like everyone else. He claimed he was innocent. He said it was all fake, that it was a bunch of nonsense, and the jury found him guilty. So this is the guy I was thinking of. His last name was Burroughs. So with the noose around his neck, he said the Lord's Prayer, which witches cannot supposedly do. Then the crowd basically started wanting him to not be hanged because they thought he was an innocent man. But it was done anyway, most likely because of the politics.
Yeah. They didn't want to go back on it.
Yeah. So that's a really sad story. So then there was a story of a couple who were both accused. Their names were Martha and Giles. He claimed he was not guilty and that he wouldn't participate at all. The jury basically and the judges tried to force him to plead guilty. And when he wouldn't, they laid him on the ground for 2 days and slowly piled rocks on top of him, trying to get him to confess. They asked him, "Do you want to plead guilty now?" And his last words were supposedly, "More weight."
Wow.
So he was never even convicted of witchcraft. And then his wife was hanged 3 days later.
That's awful.
It's probably the worst way to die.
Yeah. Over 2 days?
Yeah, that was the one thing that really stuck with me from the Witches Museum in Salem. They had like a fake setup with all the rocks, like set up how they thought it would have gone. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being there thinking, wow, slowly suffocating for 2 days.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy that he had that willpower, because I feel like a lot of people would have broke. And I mean, because it's clear that...
Oh, he was 80, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't it crazy? You live till you're 80 in those days, and that's how you die?
Yeah. Getting rocks piled onto you.
That's pretty old.
Mm-hmm.
So something interesting was I think it was a few years after the trials, a 17-year-old girl said she was blackmailed to accuse people of being witches. A 24-year-old who had accused years before, she had formally apologized to those whom she accused and their families because they died. And then after 1692, the legal system basically stopped dealing with witchcraft as a whole.
Wow. Is there a record of how many people they estimate died during the Salem witch trials?
So there were 20 deaths. I have that at the end.
Okay, we can save it for the end.
It wasn't that many, but there were so many people in jail and involved because it was like the town conspiracy. So 49 witches were freed from jail, but 3 died in jail while they were waiting. Let's see. Okay, so then there was a family called the Putnams. These were the minister's biggest supporters. And something weird is they were behind 181 accusations of witchcraft.
Oh my gosh.
So basically there was a dispute over where the church would be. So there was a line, looking back, we can see there was a motive to accuse the church opposers who didn't agree with the Putnams.
Mm-hmm.
So Ann Putnam accuses a different minister, George Burroughs, and says that he killed his first 2 wives and he's the leader of the witches. And George Burroughs is the man who recited the Lord's Prayer.
Gotcha.
So let's see. Then there were 4 children, I think their last name was Goodwin, who claimed they were being tortured by invisible witches. Goody Glover was accused by these kids. Goody was Irish, and basically when she was in court, they tried to force her to say the Lord's Prayer, but she spoke Gaelic. So because she couldn't recite it perfectly, they thought she was a witch.
Oh my word.
Isn't that crazy?
The logic.
Yeah, they're really smart.
They were just really bored, I think, and had no logic, and they were maybe they all were a little kooky.
Yeah, I mean, kind of have to be. You're in a foreign land, at war with the Native Americans. You're bored. Mm-hmm. You're tired. You're tired.
Yep. That's okay.
Let's see. Okay, so a very important Bible verse to the Puritans was, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." And they took that literally. So that's something kind of interesting. Okay, just here's a few facts for you.
Let's go.
So those who confessed weren't executed, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, there was a smallpox outbreak right before the witch trials. and the smallpox outbreak was thought to be caused by a witch.
Oh no. Smallpox.
So I think that kind of gave some, ammunition to the witch trials. Like I had already referenced, there were many tests that were created to find a witch. One of them was they would tie a witch's finger to their opposite toe and then throw them in the local pond. If they floated, they were a witch, and if they sank, they weren't. And either way, they died.
Isn't that crazy?
So what's the freaking point?
Yeah. I was gonna say, didn't like some of them just get drowning?
Yeah,
because
I've heard other ones where they've tied a rock to them, and
yeah, I've heard the rock one.
Yeah, but
it's like what would you rather do? Would you rather float or just drown yourself?
Well, either way, it was a death sentence.
Yeah.
So it's like, would you rather get hung or drown?
So if you claimed innocence and never admitted you were guilty,
you would die.
You would die anyway. Even if, so like theoretically somebody that they thought was a witch and was floating, they'd still kill them. Yeah. Because they didn't confess.
Yeah. Basically, upon your confession, you were killed. So it didn't make sense. If the witch touched the afflicted person, and the fit would stop, they were a witch, they thought. So that's weird.
Yeah, because those little girls didn't know the system and could just stop screaming.
Yeah. Okay, so another weird fact was dogs were suspected of being the devil. So a little girl once accused a dog of possessing her, and the villagers immediately shot the dog.
Aww.
There are, I think, at least 2 dogs who were killed because they thought they were witches.
That's awful, too.
Or the devil.
The dogs can't even talk and fake their guilt.
They can't defend themselves.
They can't fake the guilt.
But obviously that doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the accused would have their land taken away by the government. Another thing that happened was that witch hunters went door to door asking them to accuse their neighbors. So there was that.
So if you were like essentially mad or in a court battle with someone and they came to your door, you could just be like, I think they're a witch.
Yeah.
And then get your way and get your land.
I mean, it was just a petty way to, wreak havoc upon somebody's life who you don't like.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there was a place called Gallows Hill.
Mm-hmm. This
place was where we originally thought the executions happened, but I think it was like 2016 or 2017. Some historians figured out it's actually a different place, and that place, I can't remember what it's called, but it's in the parking lot of a Walgreens now.
Wow.
Yeah. But something sad about the bodies is nobody knows where the bodies were buried because they weren't allowed a Christian burial.
Aww.
So there were no markings or any way to find the people who were innocent who died. But what would happen, I guess, pretty commonly is once somebody was, thrown in a shallow grave or an improper burial, the families would go exhume the bodies overnight and give them a different burial themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering if they would either rebury or burn.
Yeah, I think they, gave them more of a honorable burial, but they don't know where these bodies are. So it's kind of creepy.
Could you imagine like doing some landscaping and finding one?
Finding some teeth.
That's like my biggest fear.
I would kind of like it.
You would. No, here's why. Because I'd be afraid that I'd find a body and then I'd be accused of being the murderer.
Well, you're innocent until proven guilty, so.
Yeah, that's true.
But you might have a bad rep with your neighbors.
Yeah, they might be a little afraid of me.
Yeah. So another interesting thing is a lot of times people assume that witches were burned at the stake here, but that never happened. They were only hung, or one of them was smashed to death.
Or drowned.
But all of the burning at the stake happened in Europe.
Wow.
So if you hear that, don't believe it. Witch trials, like I said, were common in Europe before and after the Salem witch trials. Okay, here's the total. 20 people were executed in total. About 19 were hanged. 1 was pressed.
Wow.
And I think 4 or 5 of those were men. And then I told you about the governor's wife. And then, so what he did when his wife was accused is he made it so that the courts could not include spectral evidence. They couldn't use that as a way to convict witches anymore. What I understand about spectral evidence was people claimed that a witch came to them or possessed them by a vision or a dream. I don't know why that's important, but I heard about it a lot.
Wow.
But I think it basically became harder to convict a witch.
Mm-hmm.
But the governor, didn't step in till it mattered to him.
Yeah.
Which was real nice of him.
What a sweetheart.
And people had already been hanged. But
and that's kind of when it stopped, right?
Yeah.
Kind of around that time.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so this kind of goes into why the witch trials happened at all. So Paris was the main ordained minister who I had talked about.
Mm-hmm.
People think this kind of all got started and orchestrated because he wanted socioeconomic gain.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically probably told his daughter and niece to act possessed. And then when they accused Tituba, people think that he forced Tituba to confess. And the reason he would want that is so that the other minister, couldn't gain the money or the power that he wanted.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of an interesting theory.
To make it look like he was kind of the one that saved them and everything else.
Yeah. So anytime you're going to hear about the witch trials, you'll definitely hear about Paris and Tituba.
Mm-hmm.
But another theory is basically just mass hysteria. Perhaps the little girls did get affected by ergot and, hallucinate. And then other people were influenced by that and copied it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was the perfect formula for this disaster. I mean, between the winter, the future drought,
mm-hmm.
the socioeconomic gain, the possibility of hallucination through your bad bread, which they had to eat.
Yeah.
It's like smallpox the year before. It sounds like the perfect formula for
and
this terrible event to take place.
And they had come from a place where witch trials were rampant.
Mm-hmm.
And they were obsessed with the idea of purifying their society
mm-hmm.
to the point where any imperfection, anything that could be perceived as sin was going to be cast out one way or the other. So it's a very interesting debate. There are some weird details, like how many little kids were acting this way,
mm-hmm.
and like the possessions would just stop and start. But I heard one person talking about how a lot of times these things didn't affect the kids eating or sleeping. So that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Maybe it was, some theater kids.
Maybe. Want to be actors.
Yes. But they didn't make it to Broadway.
No.
Okay. I wrote down Proctor's Hill is probably the accurate site that's now in a Walgreens parking lot.
Wow.
And I think they have put some kind of memorial there now to honor the innocent lives that were lost.
Gotcha.
So I'm sorry. I kind of jumbled my way through that.
It was really good. Very informative.
It was a little long.
No, you did great.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
I was a little nervous because
it's a lot.
It was a lot.
You had the harder task. We should have traded. I feel bad.
No. I enjoyed learning it. It's just hard for me to give that knowledge to the people.
Give the knowledge to the people, and you watched and read information, so to put it all together, and especially with the information being different and possibly not 100% active, you did great.
Yeah, and there were so many different little things included with different ways I learned about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my best, but I hope I taught you something.
Yes, you taught me something, so that's what matters, you know?
All right. Really quick, just to finish off, I wanted to provide some history. This doesn't have to do with Salem, just witches. So when you think of a witch, you obviously picture a witch's hat. So I was looking into why we think of witches in these pointy, tall hats, also known as conical hats. So basically, pointy, tall hats were only worn by Europeans in the upper class in early civilizations. When you think of a fairy princess, sometimes you'll think of that cone hat with, the fabric coming out.
Yes.
So think of that. So until around the 13th century AD, then it was adopted by common folk. And these common folk were known as pagani. And these hats they were with a wider brim than the upper class Europeans. So mostly worn by pagani. The pagani were also known as pagans. So they were not Christians.
They believed paganism is multiple gods, correct?
I think
so.
Yeah. And pagani, I think, basically meant country dweller in that time. So these country dwellers were very well known for their knowledge of healing, for herbalism, and sometimes beer brewing. So they're kind of witchy people. When, like, what we think of, witches now with their, what is that called? Cauldron. Using herbs and stuff. So a pagani was easily spotted by outsiders by this hat. Then the Catholic Church was growing, and pagans were thought to be servants of the devil. So the pointy hat was thought to reference the devil's horns at that time. Interestingly enough, these accused witches and pagans were usually women, which is weird. I don't know why. And around the same time, Jews were also forced to wear a pointy hat.
Wow.
Kind of like, the Holocaust. They had to wear the Star of David. So the reason for the shape is the wearer of a pointy hat is connected to the divine. Our brain is what connects us to our spirituality. It kind of makes your eyes gaze upward. So that's why it symbolizes superiority and spirituality.
Interesting.
So pointy hats are common in history as a symbol of power and importance.
Wow.
So that's really it, but I thought it was cool.
That's different. Yeah, I didn't know that that's where it came from. It's interesting. Like, at first I thought you were trying to say people were trying to be fancy and look like the upper class.
No, I don't know why it transferred from upper class European to country folk.
Yeah.
But it just happened.
Yeah.
So
fashion, you never know.
I think that really is it when it comes to what I found on witches. I hope that didn't bore you too much. I don't know if I did a good job explaining everything, but
I know I didn't, because like I said, if I were to sit here and read the whole article, it would take 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's like so much, like, and if you like, I'll link the article maybe or something, because if you read it, it has to do with an introduction to the haunted place, how it connects to the witch trials, if at all, the haunted sightings, and like, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just hard to explain.
Doing research on your own, there's so many resources.
And there's not a lot of documentaries about haunted places in Salem because it's so focused on the witches.
Well, there's so many, stories here and there. Everyone can make up their own ghost story. But as far as history goes, it's pretty consistent when it comes to the witch trials. So I would start with some YouTube videos. There is a History Channel documentary, which is what I watched.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, do you want to read our misconnection?
Yes, I do, because I'm very excited about this one.
All right.
Okay. The Black Man at Sugar Creek in Charlotte,
North Carolina.
Yes. Okay. I wish you didn't have your kids with you. Maybe either one of us would have been brave enough to say something to the other. I'm the Asian that you caught looking at your crotch.
I'm the Asian that you caught looking at your crotch. All right.
You were looking me up and down so hard I could tell what you were thinking. I had to turn around to show you what you would have been grabbing. Please write back if it was you. Juicy. I'm the Asian you caught looking at your crotch.
That should be an Instagram name.
I was just like, whoa, that was very forward.
I love that.
Yes, it never specified whether it was man seeking man
or woman
or woman seeking man. It was just like
Asian.
Asian. Well, yeah, so it was an Asian person and they were looking at a black man
at
that had their
Sugar
kids.
Creek.
Yeah, and the black man had his kids with him.
Well,
so if you caught somebody staring at your crotch and you're a black man from Charlotte, then you know someone's looking for you possibly. So
that was delicious.
Hop on that.
I loved that.
I'm glad you did. I thought it was really funny.
Well, I think that's it for this spooky episode. Do you want to finish off with your best witches laugh?
I'll get you, my pretty. Is that good?
Kind of sounded Hispanic.
Wait. I'm trying. How do witches laugh?
That was perfect.
Bye, bees.
Bye, bees.
Whoa, oh. That was scary, man, not witch. But, you know, men can be scary witches, too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Basic Bee Podcast. Make sure to follow the Basic Bees on Instagram at Basic Bee Pod, or watch the video podcast on YouTube. And always remember, live, laugh, love.